Hello, everyone. We'll be starting the broadcast shortly. We still have a couple of people coming in. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to our webinar, the ConEd Massive Success Story. I'm Kat Pullen, part of the marketing team here at Cohesive, and we will be talking about ConEd's upgrade to the IBM Application Suite. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing with our team members. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send an email with a link to it and a copy of the slide deck within 24 hours of the broadcast. We will be meeting the phone lines throughout the presentation. If you have a question, and we do encourage them, please enter them into the question box field, and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. Oftentimes we have more questions than we can answer, and we will send out an email if that is the case. And with that, I will pass the introductions and the presentation off to Candy Robeson, Director of Business Development here at Cohesive.
Thank you, Kat. Can you guys hear me okay?
Can, yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, I am really excited for the panel we have today and the discussion that we've prepared, and for those of you that have joined us live and those that are watching the recording. We are going to have the opportunity to talk to Bob Fike from ConEdison about their MAS journey from the very beginning, why they made the decision to be an early adopter, how long did it take, what was the process, and also the excellent team that was on site delivering the project, Bennett Tan and Rachita, and get their perspective about what this really looked like as we worked with IBM and other partners to deliver the upgrade. And with that, Bob, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Fike, and been working at ConEdison for coming on 21 years now. Working with Maximo at ConEdison for about 18, been through a number of upgrades. I was the business PM and the overall PM pretty much for the upgrade to MAS from 7612. And it was a good experience. I'm happy we have a chance to talk about it here, and I'll leave it at that for now.
Excellent. Rachita?
Thanks, Candy. So hi, everybody. I'm Rachita Bhatia. I'm the Services Director at Cohesive, and my role on the ConEdison project was, being part of that PMO office and supporting the delivery of the project and, managing the risks, which is a huge portion of the project. And we'll talk about that as we go through kind of the rest of the, webinar today. But yeah, supporting the functional team, the change management activities and training, as well as the technical team. So lots of different hats throughout the duration of the project.
Great. And Bennett?
Hello, everyone. My name is Bennett Tan. Been working with Maximo for over 10 years now, and my last 2 years have been focused around MAS deployments specifically. At ConEdison, I was the infrastructure lead, and so I was involved in helping design the architecture for MAS and then implementing it.
That's great. Thank you very much. And Candy Robinson, I've been with the Maximo team for 20 years. I came from MRO Software. I am thrilled to be talking to Bob about ConEd as an early adopter. I think that's one of the most exciting things is as we're on this journey, what does the market look like and what benefits are delivered in the upgrade to the Maximo Application Suite, and what went into the decisions around staying on-prem versus going to the cloud, which is definitely some of the conversations we've been having with clients this year, is as we talk about infrastructure and we talk about the licensing shift, and then we talk about the business process, especially for clients like ConEd, Bob, that have been using it for, you know, a couple decades now. So what benefits are delivered in this upgrade? So super excited to talk about that. And we're going to go into the overview and then some deeper questions around, you know, what that looked like through the last year as you went through the process. So Ruchita, do you want to?
Next slide. All right, and then over to you, Bob. Tell us a little bit more about
Sure.
ConEdison.
So we're ConEdison of New York. We're in this little town in the Northeast called New York, and we have millions of customers for gas, electric, and steam. We have the largest steam distribution system in the world, and we put that large steam distribution system and that whole business into Maximo a year ago, April. And we have lots of other businesses in Maximo, right? So the story of Maximo at ConEdison, it's about businesses within the business, substations, transmission, distribution, substations, overhead transmission, underground transmission, a dielectric system, facilities, generating stations, steam system. So we're proud of what we do. We've been doing power in New York for 200 years. We're the oldest publicly traded symbol on the stock exchange, New York Stock Exchange, and you know, and Maximo has been a big part of what we do since 1998. I've got to minimize a little thing here, get it out of the way. Stand by. Come back. Okay. So this little graphic on the right really describes the journey for us with Maximo at ConEd. Back in 1998 was when we went live. I think it was on version 4, which was before my time. My history goes back to 5.2. But at that time, the SSO, that's substation operations. SBU is steam business unit, that's generation. So different use cases in Maximo, different, you know, assets, yes, but different business processes, different compliance requirements, things like that. So S&TO, that's system and transmission operations. So that's the energy control center, the transmission overhead and underground. And all that has been in Maximo since 1998. And then more recently, our facilities group, people who take care of buildings, you know, ceilings, doors, conference rooms, and much more, by the way. You know, there's a lot to it, not just buildings and stuff. They went into Maximo in 2018. We have a flush water treatment facility. We have environmental operations in there, and you know, others. So we put our smart meter group in there, AMI, in 2020, and a very small use case, not as broad as it might be for that business. And 2022, as I mentioned, steam distribution, and then a number of service request use cases, right? People using service requests for their customers to access their services, and Cohesive worked on that project with us. And then we've got this crazy roadmap going on right now. Not crazy like we're out of control, but crazy busy. We've got no less than 15 projects right now going on in Maximo, because it has been identified as the enterprise work management system going forward. In the past, we've had different ones across the enterprise. So we're doing a lot of work with Maximo at ConEd, and that's part of the reason why we went on MAS-sive as early as we did. We're not normally early adopters at ConEd, but we did this time. So that's the story. Anything else I should touch on?
I love that slide, Bob, because I think it really demonstrates I masked regularly. Over the last 20 years, I masked regularly. If clients are really like saturated, are they, are they really, have they consumed all of Maximo? And my answer is always no. It's like 20 or 30%. There is so much more. And I think especially as we start to talk about the Maximo Application Suite and all of the additional applications and accelerators that are delivered in the application suite, you really start to look at that arch of where ConEd was in your journey from 1998. I also like that you identified, like I entered the journey at 5.2. I was 4.1.1. So I started working with ConEd when you guys were still on release 4.11. It was a great release. So was 5.2. So the MAS upgrade at ConEdison, how long did it take you?
I can speak to that a little bit too, Bob, if you want, because I remember, I think you've probably been talking about MAS for way before when we joined, when CoHesive came on and partnered with ConEdison. We started our discussions, I believe it was January 2022, when we started the, discussions on kicking off the project, and then we did a little bit of, okay, let's get going. And then Bennett, you might recall, we sort of, got into some discussions, some technical discussions, and then discussed sort of an overall design. And we realized that, ConEd had a very specific, requirements that hadn't been done before, even by IBM or any other client, right? And Bennett will tell us a little bit more about that. And so we had to pause the project for a bit and then do a proof of concept and then come back and kick off the project again. I believe it was in September was when we started. So that's kind of when we jumped right in. And, our objectives and outcomes are kind of laid out on the screen. We said, that's what we're doing in the project. Let's be very focused. We are going to upgrade ConEdison from 7.6.1 to the MAS. The version that we were targeting was 8.9, and I believe it was 8.9.5 at the time. And make sure our existing integrations or customizations, which there weren't that many at ConEdison. For customizations, there's many integrations. We wanted to make sure that those obviously all got ported over to MAS-sive. They're working the same as they do today, as well as ensure that our user base, whether it's end users, whether it's administrative users, are able to understand what the changes are. They're able to get the training that they need to be able to support the changes as administrators, especially. And so we went in with those objectives, and then as an outcome, we were expecting a few different MAS environments, as one would expect from a MAS upgrade project. So the other piece that was a little bit adds to the complexities, as Bob was saying, was there's at any given time, there's 10 or 12 projects that are going on, related to Maximo. So all of those environments needed, or all of those projects needed environments as well. To ensure that they're able to continue their development or their testing as we're doing our upgrade, and once we're live, they're also able to go live right after us, and they don't have to pause their work. So we, as an outcome, we created a few development and test environments, a UAT environment, a disaster recovery environment, and of course the prod MAS environment. And then the other outcome was, again, having those users be able to understand, transition into the new environment with as much ease as possible and make it as smooth as possible for them. And so, yeah, we started September 2022 was when we kind of picked it up, really, and the project went live this year, Labor Day, so September 4th, 2023 was when we kind of went live. So it was stretched over 18 months because we started it originally January, but we paused and we did a few things in between there. So really, I think about between 12 to 18 months is what I would say. What do you guys think, Bob, Bennett? Do you agree?
Yeah, can I jump in on that? Sorry,
yeah,
Bennett.
for sure. Yeah.
But, I imagine a lot of people watching right now are wondering how long their MAS upgrade might take. And when we say 18 months, that was 18 months for our MAS upgrade. And number one, this was a learning experience. It had to be a learning experience, right? So nobody had done this before. There are some out there that were not the very first, but so there was learning. That slowed us down a little bit. There were surprises. There were special needs at ConEdison. We have very low tolerance for cyber risk, as it should be, right? So there were requirements there. We're on-prem, not in the cloud. That required more work, a lot of infrastructure work. Bennett can talk about that. But so that 18 months was I would say, one of the more challenging MAS upgrades. We've been using Maximo for a long time. Therefore, we're special, right? We've got a lot of special things about our Maximo use case. So those things had to be dealt with. And on that, there was something, and we'll talk later about the OCM, right? Change management, and we'll get into that. So I won't touch on that right now. So go ahead, Bennett, you were going to say something, I think?
No, I think you guys really covered it all, right? Just with and we'll segment into this later, but yeah, there were a lot of initial planning due to the new infrastructure and cyber requirements that did extend the time of the project, right? But yeah, we'll definitely talk more about it in the later slides.
So what should we know ahead of time to plan for the new infrastructure required to deploy MAS? I think this goes to that conversation you started in January, but you didn't actually really kick off the upgrade until September. So where does sizing the infrastructure and making the decision between staying on-prem and moving to the cloud, where does that happen?
Well, yeah, I can definitely. Well, before we get into that, I would like to kind of just give a high-level overview on the differences between what MAS, the infrastructure for MAS now compared to what we know in Maximo 7.6, right? So looking at this diagram here on the left side, if we look at what we're used to, which is virtualization, starting from the bottom, right? We've got our base infrastructure, and then we have our host operating system, right? And this can be vSphere or a hypervisor, right? And then we have our individual virtual machines sitting on top of that host operating system, right? So each virtual machine will have its own guest operating system as well, typically Windows. And then we have a Maximo environment sitting on top of it, right? So in this example, we have 3 environments. So we've got dev, test, and production. All right, so now if we compare it with the containerization diagram on the right, and then this is what MAS is utilizing now, right? So starting from the bottom again, you have your base infrastructure and you've got your host operating system. This host operating system is now sitting on Red Hat Linux, and it is using the containerization technology. And so your MAS instances now are sitting in the form of a pod. So it eliminates the need of a guest operating system, and those pods are way less resource consuming, and you can put multiple pods on that system, right? So in this example, again, we have 3 environments set up, and a dev, a test, and then a QA environment. And the QA environment can have different pods allocated specifically for UI, for the cron, and for the MIF if needed, or for reporting, right? So those can still be separated, as we know. But yeah, they're now all sitting in a small form pod, and it really eliminates that need for that guest operating system in between. Okay, if we go to the next slide. So what does a cluster look like in OpenShift, right? So we typically would have 3 master nodes sitting that is running the core components for OpenShift and Kubernetes, all right? And these 3 master nodes, they don't take on any workloads for MAS. They only control and serve the OpenShift cluster to make sure that it's stable, that it's running, and it's designed this way so that, you know, workloads, let's say if we have a long running report, it doesn't take down the cluster, right? So then we have at the compute plane, the worker nodes, and this worker nodes, you know, you would want to have two nodes minimum to support high availability, but it's not limited to 2, right? You can have an infinite amount of worker nodes, and this is where MAS and manage will sit on, right, and get processed on. And this is where all the work, where it carries all the workloads. And for each of these nodes, they are essentially virtual machines, right? It's just that together they form the cluster. So depending for your master nodes, typically you can get away with each machine being about 4 CPU and 16 gigabytes of RAM. For the worker nodes, typically we would like to recommend a 16 CPU and 64 gigabytes of RAM each. All right, and so really to summarize, right, we know that, well, MAS now utilizes containerization technology with Red Hat OpenShift, right? This is a Linux-based system, and so it requires Linux administrative knowledge if we were to choose to go on-prem. You know, organizations should really evaluate if training is required. If they choose, again, if they choose to go on-prem, right, with OpenShift and Linux, and this would be otherwise, you know, it could be worth exploring if a cloud-based option is better for that through a managed service
Can
offering.
we drill into that, or can I tell you what I think you just said in my own words, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Chime in, Bob.
again, people watching are probably saying, okay, what are we going to have to do to get on MAS? And what are and then of course, what are our first action items? Well, I think from a business perspective, so I'm not an IT person. I hang around with a lot of IT people and it rubs off, but I'm not an IT person. I can say MongoDB, I don't know what it is. So early on, you have to think, okay, this is new technology. Do I have the people, IT people, who know how to do Linux versus Windows and so on? And I've learned from Bennett and Rachita and the rest of the team that these things have to be considered, and that that may be a reason to go on the cloud, right? I think I've heard you saying that if you're a cloud implementation, you don't have to worry about that so much. Is it not at all, or is it less?
I think, and believe me, Bob, if you're not IT, I'm definitely not IT. So, but I think after having this conversation with clients for the last year, this is really where we start. There's a big licensing shift. There's an infrastructure sizing conversation that then is the decision tree between cloud. And one of the things that IBM has talked about for the last 5 years is hybrid cloud. So I think there's different levels in answering that question. Is it a time for you to take Maximo along with other applications to, you know, another cloud provider, but still manage it yourself, which means you would need those in-house skills? Or do you get into more of a managed service where you're really giving Maximo to a provider like IBM or ConEdison to manage in the cloud for you? And I think there's that's also sort of a spectrum of how much you want to have Maximo managed, or how much you want to scale up your team. Bennett and Rachita, jump in and tell me what your thoughts are there.
I absolutely agree. I think, yeah, it's unfortunately not a very easy answer for, you know, at a glance to say, oh, you are company XYZ and you have this many users and you have, you know, this many environments. You go to cloud and then you go to on-prem. You know, it's not as straightforward. There, like you said, Kenny, there's a few, you know, inputs that go into that decision tree. But yes, overall, obviously, if you know, as a team, as your IT team, you think that it would be harder to, you know, fill that gap in the skill set where you would be able to manage OpenShift container platform. You'd be able to, you know, have a good understanding of how to run the administration aspect in MAS. Then, you know, cloud is an option to fill that gap, right? That's a really, really good option, I guess I would say, to fill that gap. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one additional thing to keep in mind is that MAS now is requiring app points. So really, it's good to think ahead to see, you know, how many MAS environments are required, right? How many OpenShift clusters are you going to create, and where are these MAS instances going to go, right? Then you can really decide how you want to allocate those app points, right? And then I guess tying back to how many environments you want to support, then again, you can use that information to see, okay, well, is this something that is manageable on-prem, or should you bring it to the cloud instead?
Yeah, absolutely. And Bennett, you bring up a great point. I think our licensing webinar is going to be a separate session, because that in itself, we could talk for an hour.
I would like to just say, app points, you may think you understand it. You probably don't understand it as deeply as you need to. We're still working on that ourselves, and actually working with IBM to come up with tools to help us to understand our usage. So that's a good topic involved. We could take an hour easily.
It is, and I think it's that mix, Bob, of that the big change delivers a lot of benefits. There's a lot of flexibility that's in app points versus the concurrent or named users that IBM has offered for the last, decade. But it is not, you just want to make sure you're sizing it appropriately and looking at the number of app points that are going to be consumed by, install in the different environments and then your users. So that's, right, I think, an important topic. As I said, all on its own. We could talk for an hour about just that.
But MAS is this great toolbox, and app points gives you the flexibility to try things out. So that's a great thing about it. But you need, and it
delivers flexibility. As somebody who's been dealing with Maximo licensing for 2 decades, as IBM has made it easier, there's a lot of complexity in actually how our users use it, how you set it up in the security table, but then you actually get on the ground and there's a field that's been added from, inventory. Anyway, as I said, that's a whole conversation in itself. So did you run into any system configuration roadblocks during the project?
Yeah, we absolutely did. I think we already kind of gave some hints about that earlier in the introduction, but one of the biggest thing was for an OpenShift cluster, and natively it's built to require internet access, because it needs to go out to the internet public repositories to get all the images that it needs for updates, for security patches, etc. Right? And for ConEd Cyber, they have zero tolerance on cyber attacks and whatnot, and so they do not allow any internet access to any of their servers, not just Maximo, but any of them, right? So early on in the project, like we discovered this, and we've had to go down the route to deploy a air gap deployment, right? And so this was initially done with the POC with IBM, but in this diagram, we can see that we broke up the network into 2 separate networks, right? So on the left is the external network, and then the right is the internal network. So on the external network, we've got a Bastion server, and this is a especially fortified server that is built to withstand against malicious attacks. And this server does have internet connection, right? It goes out there and fetches all the images that are required for to build OpenShift and MAS and deploy MAS and manage. So once it has all those servers, that it will then push into the internal image registry that we've built that sits within ConEd's internal network. And then the OpenShift container platform will directly interact with this internal image registry to get all the images that it needs, right? So it's all staying within the internal network. It's not communicating with the external network at all. And then we've got an administrative console that's running Red Hat Enterprise Linux that can interact with the OpenShift container platform to issue it commands it gives you a CLI as well, so that you can look up information against the OpenShift container platform. So then all your clients connecting to manage and MAS will connect directly within the internal network to OpenShift, right? So that this keeps it all secure within ConEd's network only, and it's not being opened out to the public. Right, so that was one of the things that we had to go through the POC and to verify that yes, it does work, and then taking that knowledge and building out the actual environments, right? And then I guess going back to the question, there were also several key features that were missing in some of the first versions that we looked at from MAS, and we realized that okay, well these key features were added into later versions of MAS, so we've had to go through several version upgrades during the project as well. And in addition to that, we've also had to build more MAS instances than we initially had planned for because of all the parallel projects that we're running together with a MAS upgrade, right? Now, this is more unique to ConEd, so definitely something to mention, but won't apply to everybody.
Well, I think it's an important detail as we start to look at clients' roadmap for their upgrade and what parallel projects they have and what would we advise in terms of getting done ahead of the upgrade versus running alongside the upgrade. So I think it's a really good point, Bennett. And I'll just give a shout out to both ConEd and our team. Again, going to ConEd making the decision to be pioneers and be one of the first utilities globally to do a MAS upgrade, discovered this air gap architecture that needed to be changed, and ConEdison working with IBM and development got that worked into one of the very early fix packs that was released and really solved this problem. So I think that's a significant benefit to the clients that are looking at upgrading now, that's been solved for you. So what, according to you, was...
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I just wanted to speak to that, what the success that really we had, right? You just touched on it, so that's why I jumped in. We went live with basically 4 new things in the same weekend, right? We had to upgrade to MAS. We had to upgrade our mobile solution, right? We had an application, our mobile application that we use had to be upgraded to a new version so that, number 3, a new integration from that mobile solution to Maximo could be implemented, brand new. That vendor had to do that, prepare that, and then we had to implement it. And then at the same time, we're implementing a new user group, a distribution transformer supply chain group. We all went live with all of them on the same weekend. Those projects all worked in parallel, and they were all challenging. They weren't none of them easy.
Bob, and what was ahead of schedule also.
We went, and then we were asked to go live 2 weeks early because another big project here had to push, and we were asked to take their go live weekend, and we did, and we succeeded. So
yes, yeah.
And it's a big team. I'm just one person here. So many people work to make it happen. So just be clear about that.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. So what, according to you, was the key to overcoming the roadblocks that came up during the implementation of the project?
That was a perfect seg from the last answer. Go for it, Bennett.
Yeah, I would definitely attribute it to collaboration, right? It was a great team effort. It was between ConEdison, IBM, and ConEdison, right? And again, going back to that air gap deployment, like we first had to do a POC. That was a joint effort with IBM, right? And then once that was done, then we worked together with ConEd IT to reproduce that to subsequent environments, right? And then with going into a new product like this, we found several software defects, right? Or even shortcomings of MAS, right? Where we could do something in Maximo 7.6, but we found that some of those features were missing or stripped away, right? And so we gave the feedback back to IBM, right? And we opened up cases with them to help track track them and remediate those defects. And through this entire project, really, we've been able to develop close relationships with key IBM developers, right, to kind of continue to exchange that information to help improve the product overall. And then I guess going back to some of the features that we found were missing, we couldn't implement all of them in time for ConEd's go live schedule. Seeing that how it was brought up, 2 weeks in front of the original schedule, but we did identify some of the workarounds and put them in place until post go live. Then we can continue to go through the MAS upgrade to get those features eventually, right? And I think
for example, right, one of the workarounds is our Active Directory used to automatically create a user record in Maximo when someone was onboarded to the company. That didn't work, right? That was, if I say it correctly, it was broken with MAS-sive, right? IBM is fixing it, and it's fixed in 8.11, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is that correct?
And it's a very specific use case where you have a certain, based on I guess more than a certain number of users, more than 10,000 users. If you have, multiple distributions lists. So there are certain specific cases as to why ours specifically didn't work. That is now fixed in 8.11.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And we have a workaround for it. It's tedious, but we're okay until we implement 8.11 in the coming couple months.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yep.
Bennett, please continue.
No, that's a great example. Definitely, and I know, Bob, you're the one of the teams that had to implement that workaround, so just how tedious it could be.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess one more thing that I wanted to add was when we mentioned that we had to add in additional MAS instances than that we initially did not plan. And we can do that, right, due to the scalability that OpenShift now provides, right? We can easily add more pods as needed, but also going back to just the worker nodes, we had mentioned that it's not static, right? If you can grow the size of the cluster as needed, if you're adding more pods and you require more worker nodes to support that, to make sure that your cluster has those resources to continue to grow and expand, you can do that. It's part of the native architecture of OpenShift.
I'd just like to say for this slide, this is the best support I've ever seen from IBM in my years working with Maximo. And I get it that we're early adopters and they want to see us succeed, but I think it's more than that. They really are very much engaged right now. So I just wanted to call that out. And really, it's not just a, hey, look, IBM's great. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is be aware that they've got a lot of people involved in what we're doing, all of us in the Maximo user community, going to MAS. They're here for us. I got that very much from a lot of IBMers being involved in our project. So I think most people can expect that kind of engagement from IBM when they go there. So there's a lot of concern, right? I'm in a lot of Maximo user communities, and there's a lot of people out there like nervous about going to MAS-8. It's a big change, it's a big technical change, and be aware that IBM knows that, and that's what I learned from them, that they're there for you. So.
Yeah, and also this is a place where, Bob, I know you'll agree, I'm going to plug the Maximo user groups. There's regional and product industry focused user groups, and I would encourage all Maximo customers to engage in some way in those user groups. It's really where that thought leadership is exchanged, and what I've noticed is IBM is also really present in those meetings, and it's not only about the success of the upgrade, it's about the ongoing roadmap. And so I feel like more than ever, that process for the request for enhancement has changed, and they're really taking it seriously around how they're investing. So there's a plug for the Maximo.
Northeast Maximo user group. Did you know there's a Northeast Maximo user group? We had our last meeting at the IBM Innovation Center in Manhattan. It was fantastic. If you missed it, you missed something. Be aware that it exists. We want you to attend. Thank you.
Can you speak to the user experience and reactions to MAS from a change management perspective?
I think this one, Bob, you'd probably be the ideal person to talk about it.
Sure. I'll say it. It was pretty easy, relatively speaking. Maybe it was easy because we did a good job before the go live. I think that's part of the story, right? So working with the change management lead in ConEdison and myself and others in the Maximo business admin team, we can talk about what that means. We won't have time, but sometime. We laid the foundation to the change, right? It's change management 101, but letting people know something's coming. What is it? Oh, we let them know what's coming with videos and tools. But ultimately, giving people things to look at, what's new in MAS. That was one of our videos, where and I think, so I'll come back to terminology, don't let me forget, but we gave them videos to watch, we let them know it was coming, we gave them plenty of advance notice, and then we went live and it was quiet. And I'm at the other end of that noise. I and others, right, are on the team when the end users, we're very close to the users. And if there was a problem, we'd know very much, very well about it, right? And there wasn't. It went very smoothly. Just this morning, a substation supervisor who I share an office with said, man, it was so smooth. I didn't ask him. It just, unprovoked. So change management compared to other projects is easier on this one. But there is a couple of specifics. Terminology. IBM has changed the name of the Maximo you're used to using to manage. I still call it Maximo. Sooner or later, I think some people are going to be confused, right? It's going to say, wait a minute, Maximo, what's the new people will say, Maximo, what do you mean? I see manage, what's that? And, and MAS, the word Maximo is still in it, Maximo Application Suite. So those are some important clarifications to make, and your language and the way you speak about this new tool. And it is like a new implementation, by the way. I think Bennett might talk about that a little bit, as opposed to an upgrade, typical upgrade. But manage is Maximo, Maximo is manage, right? MAS is a suite of applications, and manage, which is Maximo, is in that suite. So that's the other piece. That's the story for change management in this project, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think from my perspective, when we went into the project at the beginning, Bob and Bennett, you remember, there's a lot of, fear of what's coming down the pipeline. Oh, everything's going to change. Oh, it's based on, Linux, and, it's a huge change. It's a platform shift. So there's a little bit of that fear in the beginning from our user group, because they just didn't know what's coming down the pipeline. So I think one of the key things, and maybe we'll hopefully get some time to talk about that in a later slide, but one of the key things was getting them in front of a MAS environment and giving them the opportunity to play around in their UAT or in a sandbox environment, and then kind of seeing that journey from a user go, oh, everything's changing and it's going to be, we don't like change, and why did IBM have to do this, to going and actually logging in and doing what they're supposed to do, or doing what they were doing in 7612, and then saying, oh, well, you know what, actually I can just do whatever I used to do. I didn't have any significant issues or changes with what I did before and what I can do now. I still do the same thing. So just kind of watching people have that mental journey in their head to kind of be like, oh, well, it's actually not too bad. That was really satisfying to see. And then, that also, because as Bob, you're saying, it was easier on the end user side, that allowed us to kind of focus on the administrative side, because that's where, the change is there. There's a new administration, side of things that is external to manage. So that's where our focus kind of went. And it was good that we had that, time to be able to say, okay, well, our end users are good. They've seen it. They understand it. Administrators, here's what's new for you. So that's kind of where our focus was. But yeah, as Bob said, from a change management perspective, it was fairly easy for us to kind of have the users transition into the new environment.
Great.
And it is different. It looks very different. There are certain navigational changes that are, personally, I don't like. And we've given that feedback to IBM. And it's one thing to not like it. It's another thing to not understand why the change was made. So we've given the feedback to IBM. They're considering it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And we can speak to that sometime offline. But
Yeah. What are some of the key lessons learned in this upgrade?
I think from my perspective, and I'd like to hear from both of you guys as well, Bennett and Bob, but I think the biggest one from my perspective would be understanding what complexities lay ahead of you, right, as an organization or as a team, from all of the different aspects of what you have implemented in your Maximo environment today. So whether it's, do you have a mobile solution or not? Do you have integrations? How many? What types of integrations are they? Is there any security requirements specific to those integrations or to your Maximo environments? Do you use LDAP? How many users you have? There's just kind of each aspect of your environment, looking at it individually and recognizing, okay, this is special about our environment. So how are we going to deal with that? So recognizing that and then kind of coming up with a plan for it. I think that was the biggest lesson learned for us was, there's a few things that as we went along the way, we're like, oh, okay, we didn't think about we would need this from a mobile perspective, or oh, our mobile solution needs to be LDAP integrated as well because our Maximo is LDAP integrated. So both of those things need to make sure be compatible with each other. So just planning, I guess, as much time as possible spent towards planning takes away that, minimizes that time being spent towards troubleshooting later on. So that was kind of a big one from my perspective. And then I think the second one I already said, getting your users in front of the MAS environment, I think was really, really key for us. What about you, Bob?
well, I was going to let Bennett go first, if you don't mind.
Sure,
I don't want to hog. Go ahead, Bennett.
No, all good. I guess I would just speak for more from a technical and architecture perspective, right? Again, it's big planning, right? Like make sure you spend enough time to start planning and recognizing the changes that are required, right? Like there is no Windows option for the underlying architecture for MAS anymore, right? Like it's all Linux, right? So if folks are in-house Windows only, right, then this is, plan ahead, right? It might be a good time to think ahead to see, okay, well, if we are doing on-premise and we need to support something that's Linux based, then perhaps we need to, send our administrators to training for Linux, right? Just basic Linux knowledge training, right? And then also, again, just planning around how many environments you need, and because that has really compounding effect on your licenses and where you want to place those environments, right? So definitely give ample enough time to plan. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and this is really a very technical upgrade, right? What I mean is tech heavy. It's not a lot of OCM, not a lot of, the business side involvement as maybe in other upgrades. But some of the things, so one lesson learned, the question is lesson learned, third-party applications that integrate with Maximo that you count on. So in our case, our mobile solution was not ready, even though we gave them a heads up and said, we're upgrading to MAS-8 in 23, and we'll need your application to work with it. And they weren't ready for us. It came right down to the wire. So if you've got other applications that need to integrate with this new kind of platform, right, this new technology, make sure, put them on the spot, or will you be ready for our upgrade? And hopefully you won't run into the problem we did, especially, we were early, but we gave them notice. So give them notice, say, hey, look, we need your application to work with MAS-8. Does it? Is it ready? Ask that question. Knowledge transfer to your support team, right? So there's Bennett, it's kind of inferred in what Bennett said, but your day-to-day run team, your IT support, make sure they speak the new language, they know the new system, and they should be involved in the project to gain that knowledge, right? So their involvement in the project will help them with that. And the new UI, getting used to that it went smoothly, but personally, I found it challenging, which is pretty interesting. I use Maximo more than most people, and I found it challenging, the new UI. So I've got a lot of notes from our lessons learned. But third party, Active Directory, we talked about, knowledge transfer. Those are the main things. Oh, we had to do multiple upgrades during the course of our project too, point upgrades. And you guys can talk about that. You touched on it a little bit earlier, but that was a little bit of a surprise. And maybe that people won't have to deal with that as much either if they're not early adopters. So I don't know what Rachita and Bennett have to say about that, but those are my notes from lessons learned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and on the point of the, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kat.
Yep, just breaking in, we've got about 10 minutes left.
Okay, sounds good. So just quickly add on the point of the the multiple point upgrades, balancing, which I think we have on the slide as well, is balancing between those was something that again was tricky for us because, like I said, it was a moving target and we had to kind of go from, okay, we're going with 8.9.5, but oh wait, we don't have these in that version, so maybe go to 8.9.6, or well, it doesn't have this, so maybe go to 8.9.7. So just going in with by prioritizing your testing, I think that was one of the key things that we found. The more bugs or the more showstopper issues that you can find up front, that helps you sort of zero in into what is priority, what is key, what do you absolutely need to have in your version when you go live, and then go to as latest of a version as you can, because again, with the quarterly releases or new features coming in, it may be hard because you might start with one version and by the time you go live there's a new version that's out there, right? So testing is absolutely key, and establishing a process for how to prioritize the bugs and how to address those bugs was one thing that was a takeaway for us, for sure.
And I think there's
be ready to test.
Yeah.
Amass your forces to test, because we did a lot of testing for other reasons too, but you really need to be thoroughly testing it, regression testing, UAT. Be prepared. You must do lots of testing to shake out all the details. Sorry, Candy, go ahead.
No, I think that's important, and I think there's two pieces to this. One is IBM is changing the release process. Some of that was the early releases. I'm going to call them a little unstable. We're in a much better place at this point with 8.11, and then 9 is due out in the first part of next year. There's also IBM support policies are changing, and so really understanding what is end of support and what does the release cycle look like. I think for our Maximo clients, it's not as easy as being able to adopt new features and functions. Some of what I think for the past year, though, has been more around security and stability and having to adopt the point releases that were coming out. But Bennett and Rachita, I'd like your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think having that a version that now, like you said, there's versions that are have long-term support. Picking that is important. Obviously, making sure that that's the version that you want and it has all the functionality that you as an organization will be using, and then going and doing as much testing as you can with that version installed. So that was key for us.
That's a great segue into, so what is a tip that you'd like to share with other organizations that are starting this journey?
I think we've sort of scattered them throughout the discussion, but one that I can kick us off is the the terminology one that Bob, you said, learn it, share it, start using it. As Bob said, we're still getting used to the terminology, so it takes time. So please start as soon as you can and get your users familiar with the new terminology, with the new applications within the MAS suite, and so that they're more used to it as time goes on.
IBM has taken to calling the down level versions EAM. So if you're talking about Maximo 7.6, IBM refers to it as EAM. And then the future version in MAS is managed. So I don't know that I'm I'm going to be able to do that, but that's one way of doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. What about you, Bennett? What do you think are some tips?
Well, yeah, I think really it comes down to uh, planning early, right? And also, most importantly, I think a lot of people say that, okay, well, this is just a Maximo version upgrade, but it's not really just a version upgrade, right? It's not something like going from 7.5 to 7.6, where architecturally everything can still stay the same, Windows to Windows, right? Like this is going from virtualization to OpenShift, right? So what I like to tell customers is, even though yes, innately it is an upgrade, but more so treat it like it's a new app that you're deploying, right? And make sure that that you do your due diligence and to find out what comprises of that new app, right? What is the architecture required and the training and the knowledge to support this new app.
And I would, a lot of my, advice is do good project management, right? All Maximo projects, whether it be an implementation or an upgrade, there's certain things you have to be good at, you have to drive, testing, do good testing, discover the issues. And I mean like unit testing, right? So that's before the UAT and all that, but have, find the differences, because the new platform changed some things. For example, column widths got changed. All of a sudden, we couldn't see everything in a certain field. And fortunately, we had, the cohesive team was very responsive on that. And it's like, hey, fix these columns, and they did, and we moved on. But you have to find that. If you don't find it, your users are going to find it. That's not the way you want to find those things. So have your testers ready, muster the troops, and there's that. And I guess that's it. I'll stop there.
I think the last point here on the slide deck, understand, explore additional capabilities within MAS for your organization. I think that's a perfect segue into this. I'll lead this question because this was from my end, but this was for you, Bob. What's next on the roadmap for ConEd when it comes to the usage of MAS, or where are you guys at with it now?
What isn't on the roadmap? We have 15 different projects going on, at least right now, right? We've got 12 legacy applications we're replacing with Maximo functionality. And that's just basic, that's using manage, right? But we're also exploring the other tools there. We had a proof of concept effort going with IBM, and we're working with their folks to develop a proof of concept around, predict, monitor, assist, the different applications in the suite. We had to put that on hold because of all of our other projects. But for example, I was in a call the other day about HoloLens, right? An augmented reality use case that we're exploring at ConEd. And I said, hey, did you know we've got Assist now in the Maximo Application Suite? It uses augmented reality. We now have something pretty handy, readily available for us to explore because we're on MAS-sive. So that's the way I see us looking at it as we go along. It's like, hey, we have a need. We're moving ahead in our enterprise asset management. That's what EAM is. It's a science. It's not an application, by the way. And we want to do something. What's in our toolbox? Let me take a look. And and these tools will be doing that as we go along, as well as implementing all these different use cases in manage. So that's for the next 2 to 4 years. We'll have at least 15 different go lives in the next 2 to 4 years. Small cases, a lot of small things, and couple of big ones.
That's exciting.
We'll be busy.
That is exciting. Yeah. All right. I think we're coming close to time, so maybe Kat, will hand it to you, and then we'll come back to all the questions that we didn't get to and follow up with those individuals after.
It is. I'd like to thank the panelists. You guys have done a fantastic job. Bob, thanks for joining us. And Kat, take it away.
Great, yeah, thanks everyone for the questions first. We had so many that there was just no way we could answer them. So we're going to gather all of those up, send them out to you within the next couple of days. Also, we're going to be sending a link to this recording and a copy of the slide deck, and that should be out in about 24 hours. This concludes today's webinar. On behalf of the presentation team, I want to thank everyone who attended. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.